Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh
Good
from
morning.
Integrating Presence, and today I have Ahsoka with me. Ahsoka, what's happening? Sorry, yeah, you already said good morning, so good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon here in Bangkok. Happy New
Yeah,
Year. A bit late.
it is. So Ahsoka's back for the maybe a part two, but something different too. So we're going to figure it out kind of as we go along. We've already talked for probably over a half an hour beforehand about all kinds of Dhamma talk topics, and I would consider Ahsoka a Dhamma protector, Dhamma enthusiast, and Dhamma globetrotter. Maybe I don't know, amongst many other titles. So if there's any kind of introduction you want to give to yourself for people who haven't listened to the first episode, or we can skip right over that and jump in to kind of what you want to talk about today.
It's interesting that you're asking me this because I've been wondering myself in terms of identity. What kind of identity do I have? Do I have a solid identity or not? None in disguise, basically. That's why my head is shaved still, although I'm not living in a monastery. And usually how I introduce myself is an 8-precept upassika. So an 8-precept lay practitioner. And can I add a little something? Go straight into the topic.
Yeah,
The more
sure.
the more I'm watching the walk for peace of all these monks, monastics walking and doing something which concretely contributes to let some practices, some schools of Buddhism actually be a little more known, because usually Buddhism isn't really proselyting, right? Especially Theravada, they are very, and Theravada, it's also very culturally associated with Southeast Asia, and so the more I watch them, I'm saying, sometimes I'm really thinking, why haven't I ordained? Why I'm still a layperson?
So here we are in what month are we in? January of 2026.
January.
For people that don't know what you're talking about, I would imagine a lot of people do, because it's been kind of a media sensation. To tell people a little bit about what you're talking about, this walk for peace, and then why do you think it's become so popular? Of all, because I'm imagining things like this happen every once in a while, but just don't get the media attention that this has gotten so far.
Yes. So we're talking about a group of, I think initially there were 26 monastics, and they come from a monastery in Texas. But I just found out recently as well that they had also done a similar walk in India, and that's how they brought this dog, Aloka, how they brought it back to, how it was brought back to the US. I mean, brought to the US, basically. So at the moment, they currently are engaged in 120 days practice of walking. But while the practice of walking from monasteries from places to places is very common in Theravada, it's called the practice of Tudong. Usually that's what monks do during certain times of the year, from monastery to monastery, which is a practice of nomadism and a practice of non-attachment. But in their case, they are doing it with a specific purpose of peace. So the message is peace. So it's a sort of engaged Buddhism. They're walking for peace. And listening to so-called the leader, the monk who walks ahead in the line of monks, usually they walk on seniority of vasa. So they walk in seniority of how long they've been ordained, something like this. But I don't know if they follow that in the current walk. So I've listened to one of his talk, when they stop for walking, or when they stop for having a meal, or when they stop for overnight. He said peace is something you achieve inside first. So he's basically giving snapshots, nano Dhamma talk every time to a population that is from all walks of life. And that's very, we might be accustomed to listen to this, develop inner peace, be mindful of what you're doing before you talk, be aware of your mind's defilements, be aware how you speak to others, be aware of how you position your body, be aware of your actions and things like this. So body, speech, and mind, these are the 3 components of your training. But he speaks in a way that is really accessible to all. and especially people of all ages and all walks of life. And it's gathering momentum in the US at the moment. It what started to, with just a few, I would say, just a handful of people you can count on your two hands. It's now thousands, 10,000s of people. So what is going to happen when they reach in Washington, D.C.? I don't know, but it's going to be massive. And the thing is, they also encounter some challenges. So I've seen in a video past few days, they were stopped on the road by a preacher who was telling them, "Stop! You're going straight to hell because you're diverting from the word of Jesus." You know, things like this. So what was interesting in that moment was the calm, the non-engaging, and a very gentle way of saying, "Okay, we are not going to hell anyway, but if that is what you think we're doing, let us do it." You know, "No, you cannot do this because I love you. You cannot do this. Please don't go to hell." And he said, "We are not going to hell anyway. If that is your belief, thank you so much for sharing it. But we would like now to continue to walk because we are on a different, on a different path." So these little events, but the majority of the encounters are really, really a message of peace, and also how to break it down to really understanding how living in the world today requires that sort of inner peace that we've been developing with our practice, or that we might be more attuned to, because we are living.
Yeah, to say the least. And, I haven't followed this very carefully. I have seen it online. And yeah, it just surprises me how much media attention that it's got. But of course, the message, the true message of peace, if it were really sincere about this and there's no other political purposes involved, which we'll see, what happens in Washington, right? I don't know the backgrounds of these monks or anything like that, but which just go on what's presented to us, right? This notion and message of peace, the true message of peace, it is so very important. And I feel with all the shenanigans going on, I mean, I like my country, and at the same time, there is so much warmongering and so much war that America is known for. Right. And I don't want to have anything to do with it. Completely into non-harming. So that's the core. And so, but now when we take that and leave that aside as a political topic and internalize non-harming, that to me is peace,
Yep.
non-conflict, because I would say, at least in the past for me, there's so much inner conflict, right? Just within us. And so how is that going to inform how I'm with everyone else? So once we have come to terms with this inner conflict, then of course, my whole external life and my interactions and the way I relate and respond to everything around me is going to benefit when I work directly on such inner conflict and work to resolve that and come to terms and know how to deal with, relate and manage that, and let go of a lot of it too. Because if we look closely within, we realize a lot of it's not really needed and necessary. And I think the Brahma Viharas are really helpful for resolving and dissolving some of this inner conflict. And not only that,
Yes.
but relating to everything. It's the best way I've come across to relating to everything internally and externally is with these 4 Brahma Viharas, these 4 divine abidings. Yeah.
Yeah, so the 4 divine abidings is loving kindness and sympathetic joy, or supporting the effort of others also, because sympathetic
Exactly.
joy say, well, I don't like that fellow, and so I don't care what it has. So this
Rejoicing.
one,
I like rejoicing. Yes,
rejoicing at the success of others,
Mm-hmm.
and then compassion and resilience,
Equanimity.
basically
Yes,
equanimity. And
that's
so
a
now
good, yes.
I like this. I am a little, maybe because I speak numerous languages, so I've come and realized, yeah, but if you go into that language and speak of equanimity, it's understood to a French Cartesian structure of language. it says yes, but then I need to, it's not. But if you speak about resilience, it becomes, oh, okay, now I know what you mean. But equanimity means I have to be equal. I have to. So I think it's because I know a lot of languages. I've come to my understanding, but yes. So if I may just make a point, one of the first talk I heard about this monastic, he said, we are not connected with any politics. It's my witnessing in my life as a monastic. I've witnessed so much suffering. So I want to do something. And basically along the road, they speak to a number of people and everybody lots of people burst into tears. And he said, I've witnessed a lot of suffering and I want to realize that I want people to realize how that suffering is not necessarily only caused by external condition, but we might be the ones who are maintaining it. So you have to understand you're training your mind. So he's coming into that point of saying the mind, and that comes with start loving yourself. So loving kindness for yourself before. For some people, it's very difficult to be kind to themselves. So understanding that, and then develop an understanding how some of what is called in Buddhism, the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, or you can call it greed, violence, and delusion, or whatever it is, how
Ill will. I
those
like the word ill will. Yeah.
Ill will, how those are actually connected to everything that stands behind the mind. So
a root. They're the unwholesome, poisonous roots. Yes.
Exactly. I know that in Himalayan Buddhism, it is also, there are two more, in the poisons, two more I have added. One is jealousy, which is a jealousy, basically the opposite sort of rejoicing. But it has
jealousy.
this other dimension.
Yes.
And also there is ignorance, which is basically avijja in Pali, which comes as a delusion. But they define it differently in the sense it goes from the point of not having right view. So your starting point is already kind of unwholesome in the basic. But I really appreciate the work that they are doing and that momentum that they are gathering, because I think there's a seed being planted there. Somehow it might dissolve, and it's not planned because there is an opposition as something happening politically in the US at the moment. It's just that's a good timing for things to happen, Maybe they will become, like Thich Nhat Hanh also did something similar. Many. Actually, that main monk is actually Vietnamese. You were right in that sense. Anyway, the Brahma Viharas, to come to the point of inner peace. How do you develop inner peace when it's completely crazy outside? You can't avoid what's happening outside unless you are in a position of decision making, or you are involved in that. You can only work in your own leverage, your own environment leverage, and your first immediate environment is your mind.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in here and say, and this is why I have been so disillusioned by politics in general, is because it's just, if the problem was politically created, I don't think another political solution is going to solve it. So I look at this and I look at politics in the United States, and it just goes back from left and right. And there's these two false choices. The only way I think anything is ever going to change on a fundamental, lasting level, and maybe this is an oversimplification, but it has to come from within. We have to work on ourselves. And that's the only way, really. And I found this in my own experience, that when I change internally, then my whole world around me seems to change. I mean, now, if it does literally or not, that's not what I mean so much. I mean, maybe, yeah, but it's how I view things, and then how I can respond to things instead of reacting, right? I'm able to see so much more than I couldn't see before, than working on these defilements like you talked about. These are like the roots of everything wrong in the world. Greed. How much of the ills of the world are driven by greed? But we can't just go and fight people that are greedy, because in the Dhammapada, right, it says ill will. Then ill will, that's the antidote, is metta, or non-ill will. So ill will never be overcome by more ill will, only by non-ill will. will it be overcome. This is an ancient and eternal law. So these things are done internally first, I feel, and foremost, because if I don't have a degree of non-greed, non-ill will, non-delusion, well, then how am I going to help change anything in the external world to the degree that I can if it's there within first, you know? And so that's the way I look at it. Again, I wouldn't see the value of this until, how do we get people to actually value that and see how important it is? Because for us, it's second nature and a no-brainer. But for other people, we're trained everything external, right? We're trained this is the external world. There's nothing, within, that's something else for like therapists, maybe, or something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's what you're talking here is people see there's a tendency to see the reality in terms of duality, right? So the conventional world, the conventional reality, which we need to act, conventionally. I cannot go to the bank and say, Josh promised me that he would give me 100,000, and Josh is my friend, so please behind. I have to show papers, my identity, Ahsoka, Josh, here.
Yeah,
like
you can't
this.
say
So
money's a concept. You can't say money's a concept. It doesn't mean anything. So you can just give me all this paper.
You need to use.
You can just give me all this paper. It means nothing, right? Yeah.
You need to use some of the tracks or the path that allow you to be conventionally to go from on Monday to go from Bangkok to Bodh Gaya. I can't just teleport, although I can do a lot of teleporting. I need to go to the airport and take a plane and physically go to Bodh Gaya. I haven't seen anyone yet flying in the sky, but maybe it would happen. But this is one way of saying that we tend to live in a dual world, and that dual world is reinforcing, I think, in my personal observation, humble token, it reinforces the how to say, the triggering or the springing of these poisons, of the unwholesome roots, because I'm good, they're bad. So if you haven't trained your mind to actually see, yeah, but hold on, what makes me say this, that I'm good, they're bad? Yeah, okay, they're not very wholesome, but what can I do? Can I go to XYZ and say, hey, what you're doing here is not correct? I could, but I don't have that leverage. And I've had several conversations with people talking even about people who come from countries that have been constantly on conflict, right? And when you talk to them and you say, how are you still alive? Well, because I developed compassion. And eventually you develop compassion, and you also realize that to a certain extent you can't function. So you need to step out of this conventional world and develop your own inner peace. Now, for some people, it means stepping completely outside and maybe not training the mind, but just I develop compassion. My state has been in conflict. Millions of people have been passing away and dying for the past millennia. It seems like it will never stop. What can I do as a human being to stop that? Nothing. So I can step out. But other people say, those, as you say, for us, no-brainer. If you develop your mind, you train the mind to see that, hold on, as Gandhi was saying, somehow, you have to do your cleaning in your own kitchen before you can actually do certain things. It means look at yourself first. You need to change you to have the change happening. Oh, yes, but that has never happened. I've made all those monks walking in the street will never make the America a peaceful world. Me being trained in mindfulness will never not make my environment, but it might make my family more peaceful. You learn to start living in a non-dual reality where what you put in comes back at you in a way, but also in a non-dual world, you realize how there is not just a conventional world. There is a different world that you can tap into. So when you start really observing what is, as you say, for us, maybe a little more normal, you kind of stop having synchronistic thought with someone. You start having only realities that are made of metta, So loving kindness. Personally, can say, give you example, I never really have obstacle where people have obstacles. Why? I don't know. I live maybe in a different, so there are different planes of existence. But if you definitely only live on the conventional level, you're going to have several issues because the samsara is made of these unwholesome roots. And I think also, if you remember yourself, the Buddha also spoke about this,
Yes.
So someone the other day was asking, why is the Buddha always presented as sitting down? And why is the Buddha always presented as someone who detached himself from everything? I said, yes, he detached himself from everything, but to come back in a better way. There is a level of detachment. You have to go on a little bit on retreat. You have to step out a bit from what you are accustomed to. And that's that comfort zone, that little void between the comfort zone and stretching in the comfort zone or stepping out, where, how do I start? Okay. Every morning before, you can decide, every morning before touching the phone, first thing, I take a breath. Okay. How is that going to help? Well, try it. I'm just saying try. Because scientifically it's proven it works, but if you don't try, you will not know. How can I try not to be angry at being bullied? Well, realize that that person is having a bad day. It's not about you. Things like this. It requires so much that eventually the seeds of or the mindfulness path for yourself start, and then you start entering a completely different realm where it becomes easy to go to the bank and ask for money from John. Living in around monastics also helps understanding these how to, because the monastics, even though they're on retreat, they still have to interact with the conventional world. For instance, receiving meals, or in other traditions as well, having answer questions that for them are completely maybe irrelevant. If they are not householders, how can a monastic who's not a householder, who's never been a householder, understand the issues of a householder, divorcing, children going to school? Because for them, they are going to give you the base for you to understand your own problem. So I think that inner peace is the seed of for at least developing better humans in this world somehow. And it's important whether it is expressed by walking in a walk of peace for 2,500 miles, or whether it is to sit on meditation. I don't know what your take is on this.
Raised so many good things, Asoka. And I think the kind of skepticism you present there is really helpful too, because people think, what difference does it make? This kind of apathetic giving up. And I would say people in power, they bank on that people get either outraged in conflict, or they throw up their hands and say, what can I do? I can't do anything. It's pointless. I don't care. Just going to check out and do nothing. But even, the Buddha said, drop by drop, the water bucket's filled. I say this a lot. I use this a lot, but everything can potentially add up to something. So don't think, good's not going to come to me, bad's not going to come to me, or whatever. Every little thing does matter. And, it's cliche, but the longest journey starts with one step. We're seeing that in this play out, right? So don't think that it doesn't matter. I mean, this gradual effort, just a little bit here and there, it will add up over time, especially if you keep with it. And a seed, like you mentioned, a seed is another great metaphor for that. Some seeds won't sprout, but others will. And others will be very fruitful and plentiful and beneficial. And, others maybe are more weeds. And sometimes they take a really long time, but they can get really huge too over time. So, you mentioned why you have all these good things coming. And it reminded me of another sutta that basically preceptors, they get their wishes granted in a way. I don't know. I have to find the exact sutta, but basically, especially 8 preceptors, they're saying that their wishes are more easily fulfilled when they're keeping precepts. So it's really amazing how foundational this ethical practice is for me, and how important it is. And in Thai forest tradition too, I feel in Thailand that the precepts are really important, Now, the non-dual thing, this one maybe we can explore more, because I know you have more of a Vajrayana background. And for me, I think it's a great concept, and it's really helpful. And some of these teachings are so deep and so profound, and they're helpful to me. The few things I have trouble let's just say not trouble, or maybe, but I'll ask you about, I don't really have a clear definition on what non-duality means. And then not even the term non-dual right there accepts that there is a duality, right? So how can there, be non-dual with a duality? And then, but what I'm the most want to know about is how we actually take those non-dual teachings and practices and then go on the street with the average Joe who is so far removed from this stuff. It makes a lot of sense to me and brings a lot of peace and inner calm, and puts me in a really great mind state and heart state with these teachings, and really contemplating and feeling into them and using them. But then when I go into the everyday world, it's just like, I'm not to the point where I can just pretend that Joe Schmo, that's not the right way to put it. But okay, how do I then take this wisdom of non-dual teachings and then use it for mutual benefit with just the man on the street, that's completely asleep, in either good ways or bad ways. So that's, yeah.
The non-duality is put it in really plain terms, would say almost non-technical or non-jargon, or just really plain, is realizing what is usually commonly called what you put in, you get. So realizing a form of interdependence of everything, of your body, speech, and mind. It's really literally the ball you throw comes back at you in that way. So seeing, you say you don't have certain things happening, but it's because you perceive them also differently. So it's what is also called understanding how different level of consciousness are operating. There is a very popular thing. If you have a golf ball consciousness, you just have a very narrow perception of the world. Is really, to keep it plain, is like that, is to realize that the actual natural state of things that seems to be moving around or being permanent and stable, but actually we just are passing by, Bangkok will be here probably in 50 years, but I won't be watching this building the same way because I might not be here. Non-duality it really is having a clear understanding of the interdependence of everything that occurs within body, speech, and mind, and interactions with other people. Interacting. So the other person, the other people around there are a reflection of what you're calling. Does it make sense? No, well, it doesn't make sense. In a conventional word, it doesn't make sense.
But no, okay, what I meant by, to me, those are in Theravada teachings. That's dependent origination. That's the interconnectivity of dependent origination. That's kind of a trained mind with samadhi, and this isn't kind of an expanded consciousness. But I guess some of the non-dual teaching, and I don't want to get in the weeds here, but I'll just say this. What I meant by non-dual teachings is stuff like there is no observer and there's no observed, right? Everything is one. Kind of this, when they're presented in certain ways, they can be like this watered down new age thing that's not helpful. But actually what you said there is very helpful. And all those teachings are in Theravada too, But I get this self and other. I think that's where it's really helpful in a sense. Like how hard is there a self and how hard is there an other?
Exactly.
Dissolving those boundaries.
Exactly that.
They tried, and it's really helpful dissolving those boundaries in some sense, but then probably, and you mentioned karma too, cause and effect, intentionality. So it does help dissolve these boundaries a little bit, but then I guess I don't know what it's dependent on, but then it seems flimsy. That's what I meant by that, because it's using kind of a mind trick to be helpful to dissolve these boundaries that really aren't there to begin with. But it's almost like I've seen some people kind of spaced out and not being able to take some of what they've realized or are seen or think they understand, and then when they take that to the quote unquote real world, I don't know, it doesn't seem to translate well, or I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but that's
You're trying
just a
to
few
you're
things.
trying
Yeah.
to see that if you don't have a proper understanding, or if your understanding is too much on the intellectual level, then when you step out, it's not going to work, because there is no other opening, like the heart opening, consciousness opening. You haven't developed what is called in the Theravada tradition the paramis, to loosen up this sense of identity. The other day, I completed a book which is written by Pachok Rinpoche. He's a younger from the lineage of Tulku Ugyen Rinpoche. So he's a Karmakaju Vajrayanatish. But he's wrote this book basically around the concept of dignity. And why am I speaking about dignity and non-duality? Is because it comes into the sense to dissolving the boundaries that you might have between I am, these are, but at the same time, understanding that you also have a form of integrity. So other teachers would call this having compassion and having to help. Okay, this person is suffering a lot. I need to help. Can I actually help? Do I actually have the skills to help that person? And how can I help? And does that person want to be helped? So that boundary can become very loosened and not understood probably correctly, deeply, and that becomes what is called idiot compassion. Some other teacher called that the idiot compassion, like Chogyam Trungpa was calling that idiot compassion, which means I have to help because I need to be compassionate. I love to give. I'm a giver, so I need to give. But then you lose your own dignity because you can't sleep anymore. Maybe you haven't eaten. It comes at the detriment. It actually depletes your own capacities. And the Buddha also said that, we do have this experience of having this human life. This human body is given to us. It's very rare because there are a lot more ants than there are human beings. So it's very rare to obtain this human. And if you have the chance to hear the Dharma or to understand a bit about your mind, just have that dignity to sometimes say, okay, you can have compassion, but it doesn't mean don't go too much out of your way. And sometimes that fact that non-perceiving the actual understanding of non-duality means I have to help. This you and me is the same. We are one. No. We are not one because we don't have the same karma. We come from at the subatomic level. We are one. We are made of the same flesh and bones, but we are not one because our intentionality before we were born and during this. No, I am a very, very strong on that, but I keep it for myself because it goes against some. But that non-duality can easily become, okay, we are one. We one love. No, love is very important, but maintain the dignity of your practice, maintain the dignity of your sense that you are not that so much important eventually.
Yeah,
So you're very right. So you're very right when you speak about the self-identity, because it actually touches the very important point across all the schools of Buddhism about non-self. So what we are seeing today is a lot proliferation of teachings coming in all directions, including Buddhist teachings, and a lack of understanding of that Buddhism is not nihilism. That there's nothing exists, so I don't have a self. So no matter what I do, you are like me. No, it's the grasping, attachment, and the grasping.
yeah.
Is not so much about the assets, it's about the sticky mind. How do you stick to the stories you tell yourself? If you loosen that, you start really realizing non-duality. Yes, the other person is suffering more than me. That doesn't mean that I have to help every single person I meet on the road, but it means that I can be kind to that person.
Yeah,
I,
there's so. Go ahead.
we
Go
enter
ahead.
we enter another path where this non-duality becomes, it's not like a concept you have to, it's not like glasses you have to put in and remove. It's just your world becomes a completely different world. So when you see things happening in the reality, like warmongering and this, you realize why they are doing this, because the unwholesome roots, and sorry for them, but I can't change them. So I can only rely on my own inner peace. And
It's
I'm
a
really
beautiful.
coming back to that. It's really,
It
and
really.
I was actually thinking and what we were going to converse about to our conversation today. And I thought, I come up with this. What is inner peace? Is love in action. Love for yourself first. But it doesn't mean you have to become so selfish that you don't love. It means you love your heart. You can go inside the body. You love the stomach. You love start there, and then everything starts softening up, because eventually you can't battle so much outside. And by developing that love in action for yourself, you're developing it for others. And then you can step into other parameters, and then you can, you start understanding on, I don't know, these are also the basics of healing. There's a lot of healing and understanding, uh, and practicing Buddhism, as you want to put it, just globally like this.
Exactly. So
I don't know.
great points here. So the self-love I want to get on in just a second, but I wanted to address some of this. What Soka mentioned here, there's a lot of paradoxes, and I found that a lot of the spiritual path is being comfortable with these paradoxes, because when there'll be one thing presented one way, another thing presented another way, and some things are just paradoxical, and that doesn't mean that they invalidate each other. It's just when we talk about teachings like this and views, they're so subtle and so profound that a lot of times we don't have normal worldly reference points for this. So what needs to be pointed back to again and again is an experiential level. So we're just trying to put words to things that we kind of
Yes.
see and know in our experience. And even though conceptually it's really challenging to put a lot of these things in non-paradoxical language sometimes, because they are paradoxical. It doesn't make them invalid or not helpful. So I can totally see how people say, I can't resolve this paradox. Yeah, a lot of them can't be resolved. So they just have to be comfortable holding paradox. And just a quick aside, I found, because there's so much cognitive dissonance, right, in our world too. Like one
Yeah.
thing will say one thing, and then somebody says the other thing, and they're at odds. But I see the value of both of these, and that can cause inner conflict, or it seems to promote inner conflict too. But actually, if we take these two things that are causing cognitive dissonance, and we can hold them lightly and sit with them, then I've found, yes, it may be unpleasant, but then these things start resolving themselves and working out, and being okay with holding these two seemingly conflicting things. And then what I found is a lot of the distortions will start to fall away, and more understanding and wisdom will start arising, and then be able to kind of see through both and come to how it should be kind of held and responded to and addressed. I know that's kind of a lot of fancy language. I'd like to give a solid example, but just think about just take two opposing things and how there seems to be some uneasiness. And if we can just hold both of those at the same time in our awareness and sit with the unpleasantness that's involved with that or comes along with that, and see how they can kind of resolve each other, and things can kind of fall away, and there can be some peace with being able to be with those. Yeah.
It's
Now,
also, I think,
the other thing, sure.
it's also an understanding in doing these things. There's a very big understanding that comes to, or realization about how certain things work in the mind, is where do these thoughts all come? Where do they come from? So there's a lot of imagery, in Zen, you say it's clouds passing by. So people who have a tendency to visualize very easily, they're going to start running the clouds, but that doesn't mean that it's just imagery. If you actually understand who and what and where are these thoughts coming from and going, and why am I sticking to it? So I'm coming back to the dignity. Was saying the issue is not so much having or not having, is really the sticky mind and the storytelling attached to the sticky mind. Where is it coming from? This very strong sense of self, that I am a solid sense. Yes, I am a solid person in flesh and bones, but the story I'm telling is basically my label, my inputting, my constant inputting, that I am more important than the other. I am this and I am that. And usually I'm coming in the elevator. I don't want anyone else in the elevator. And all this expanding constantly, and becomes so solid that that becomes your reality. But that's not the reality. So that's where there are issues. So whether you come from Theravada or you go to Vajrayana, you pass all the Madhyamika schools, Zen, Mahayana, everything touches back on that point. So how you develop inner peace, loosen up the grasping on that sense of self.
Clinging is the problem. Clinging, like you're saying, the stickiness. I like that word sticky because that people can relate to. But clingy, people know what it's like for someone to be clingy, right? So that's where all the trouble, I mean, that one is pretty much everyone can relate to, and how when we can loosen our grasp and not cling so much, how much peace and ease that we can feel in our own experience, not a theoretical thing, but a real energetic reality. And yeah, just a few words about, the boundaries and compassion. It's really important, I find too, that just because, well, for me, my compassion practice is first acknowledgement, right? So just acknowledging to begin with. Some people don't want to acknowledge anything, but that's like the first step. Then comes care. And this is before we even do anything. And for me, that's a really challenging one because I have doubts about my own authenticity of care, or if I'm caring enough, right? Or if I'm caring in the right way at the right time. So it's a little bit different, I think, maybe with males and females sometimes about that. So males kind of show care in a different way than in general, not because we all have these feminine and masculine qualities too. But then it's like this wanting for this pain to be resolved, wanting for the pain to release and then to know peace. Now, sometimes the most compassionate thing I can do is say, okay, I need a boundary here. I need to get as far away as possible. And then I can do this from a distance, because what I'm doing now is entangling with someone or something, and I'm causing more problems than I'm helping with. So for me, at times like that, I have to do compassion from afar because there's just too much conflict or entanglement. I can always come back maybe, but that distance and boundary is needed for compassion, And how do we have compassion for ourselves when we don't have compassion? So we can have compassion for the fact that we can't have compassion right now too. And as far as the self-love goes, to me, a huge part of this is honesty, right? Because when I first started doing these I love yous to my heart, I've talked about this before, it just didn't feel honest. It felt sappy and goopy, and just not helpful. But that honesty itself is a form of self-love, right? Being honest with ourselves. So hopefully most people that are watching this have already addressed this self-honesty, but there's plenty of people we interact with that haven't got there yet. And it's a huge form of self-love just to be almost brutally honest sometimes. If some of those people, some people haven't looked at themselves honestly, and they're constantly kind of lying to each other themselves, or are glossing things over. So I won't discount that as love either. And one of the ways that Ajahn Jeff uses that I like for metta is just, a really practical thing, that it doesn't have to be an overt lovingness. It's just, may you realize, not you, Ahsoka, but like someone that I have hard finding loving kindness to or metta towards, is may you soon realize the errors of your ways for your own benefit, and change your actions for your own benefit and for those around you. It's a very practical, real, direct, kind of no nonsense care for someone, to acknowledge, no, they've done something unskillful and harmful even. But so my well wishing to them is that they see the errors of their ways and change, not from a judgmental point, but from a place of care for wanting their well being to come about. And to me, the ground level is just an absence of ill will. It's not even an absence of ill will, because that is so detrimental, for me to harbor that I want to hurt something, even if it's just a thought that I'm not going to act on. It is so painful for the heart and has consequences and can start wars even with ill will. So I think that's some of the things I want to address around Brahma Viharas.
Interestingly, I was involved in the Global Peace event in Bhutan. So it was enormous, major. There were a few days we got about 100,000 people. It had different events in one event, but it all involved chanting mantra or chanting aspirations, prayer. Like some of the Parita Sutta, some of what you would call Parita Sutta, some of the very cardinal chants also. So there was basically 2 weeks, 10 days full on that. And what was interesting is being on the conventional level, I was really literally involved in doing a lot of logistics and moving around. So I haven't had a chance to sit down and enjoy like most of them. But on the unconventional level, when I was asked and I had feedback with the Prime Minister office, said, "Did you attend? Were you able?" I said, "No, it's very difficult to be when you are the host to also enjoy the party. Usually you are the one. However, on the non-conventional level, the energies were there. So got this look, meaning, so it doesn't have that but you get the energy of it. So that's also a way of explaining non-duality, in the sense that sometimes we are removing ourselves from some places that we don't feel this is going to be maybe wholesome. And sometimes we are in places where, we gather, we get the benefits of having been there. And that's because at the unconventional level, we have attracted that. But what I wanted to say also connected with that is that some people were saying, yeah, okay, you're chanting, aspiration, mantras. How does that help for peace? Or like, the monastics now have been walking. How does that help for peace? Having peace means sitting conventionally at a negotiation table. Well, no, not necessarily. And in part because you have to realize how much leverage you might have to do certain things. So if I expand what you're saying about having compassion for the self and having compassion for others, but understanding the interplay where we have a leverage or not, you start to realize how you can have compassion for some of these political figures that we see constantly on TV. Because the idiocy on what they base their action is just so blatant. You can only have compassion for individuals like that. And they are not just one, there are many. But when you understand, when I said that to some people, they were, how can you actually have compassion for such an individual? I said, just look further, dig further. The ignorance at the basis of the unwholesomeness of even their intention. It's not a matter of judgment. It's just a matter of facts.
It's separating the person from the defilement too. It's their defilements that are acting. Yes.
And they don't know they are doing this. That's where the compassion comes. Is, come on, fellow, really, I feel really sorry for you. The problem is that when you sneeze, everybody else has a cold. That's the thing. But this is also where I think it's what I am a little concerned with, if I may step into a follow-up topic. What I'm a little concerned is that, and I can only live with it. And that's where I really like to stick to wherever are the lineages and the teachers and the traditions, where still what is called the perfect Dharma is available. I like to stick to that. It's called, in other languages, it's called the perfect Dharma, the true Dharma, and not the diluted versions, which can lead to what you spoke earlier, the spiritual bypassing. How come this non-dual thing, if you extract it from the, you become very secular. It doesn't, I go outside and it doesn't work. People are attacking me. Okay, because maybe there's something that is missing. So what I am concerned with, and it's been discussed a lot with a number of scholars as well, is the world we are entering where AI becomes a major agent. How can we contribute to, seeing already online, a number of delusion, and Buddhism says this, and the Buddha said, no, the Buddha didn't say anything of that. How do we maintain how can I say, the thread, the path is, I think, something that I've learned a lot during this year by connecting more and more with Vajrayana schools. Really check the lineages of the teachers you connect with. If the person who's giving you a teaching or the source on internet, on chat GPT, double check your facts, your sources, your information, but ask, where is that source, comes from where? What's the lineage? And can that teacher give me the names of his own or her own teachers? And it has to go up a line of something. Then it has a sense. If it's just blah, blah, then everyone can create blah, blah, That's a little bit of a concern, and I think all of us who have been delving into Buddhism in a way or another, whether it is from meditation, whether it is, from many entry points, I think we have a responsibility there to somehow, for me, at least for me, it's really my sincere aspiration to contribute to keeping tracks of what are the factors, where somehow I appreciate some of even any of the teachers who say, okay, eventually the Buddha said that. It's in the sutta number 1 in this book, because at the moment it can go in any direction.
Yes. Very important.
For me, it's very important.
Just a few words on that. This is one of the whole reasons I was drawn to what's called Buddhism, is there's not very many doctrines, but the one of them, it's been called the doctrine of open inquiry. And so I was always getting in trouble in school. I would partly take responsibility because there's a type of unhelpful doubt, right? Where you're doubting something because I'm right, I know it, and I want to show that you're wrong, right? That's not the kind of doubt that that's not a helpful doubt, right? But open inquiry is a sincere wish to find the truth, and a truth that's helpful. In Buddha, where the Buddha said, Ehipassiko, come and see for yourself. You need to check this out, and it has to be seen and known for each wise one for themselves. Yeah. So, and how do I learn a lot of things? As I ask questions, but it's questions in order to get at the real true meaning and an understanding, and one that will benefit me and those around me, and especially in the long term. So that's why I love that it's encouraged to ask questions, because some people take questions as, oh, you're not respecting my authority, you're doubting me. No. This is about getting to truth and holding things to, and taking on the accountability. So I don't recommend everyone do this, but I say again and again in my stuff, please, if I've made any mistakes, or you could add something to it, or give a little bit of a different understanding or teaching that will help me understand, will help other people understand, please do so. If I've got something wrong, please reach out, because I know, that this is really important to me. And like you said, the references, and I get lazy about that too, but I'm totally into that. This is what we have to work with, even to the point where I get a little bit nerdy on the original text. I would love for like the Polytext Society to list more in detail where they get the source text from, and then try to go trace it back to the oldest original text sources that we have, and then preserve those in images. I know there's a lot of preservation in different schools going on, which is great. Taking the images, because Some of them can be really, flimsy palm leaves and things. But these are just as a scholarly pursuit. So it's not for everybody. But I think the more documentation and the more details, but I don't know how we would do it and I just wrap this up because this gets into a little bit more specifics than we want. But, some of these texts might be hidden or well protected too. So I don't know exactly how to do that. Some of them might be interred in a stupa or something protective somewhere, or maybe kept away from the general knowledge in order to preserve it more. So I don't know exactly how to deal with that. But I feel, since in Theravada, at least, there's no secret teachings, that we can trace as far back as we can to the original text and have a cataloging system and a reference system to preserve, because this is what we have to work with, right? Now we can go into a whole nother talk of, did the Buddha actually say this or not? That's another thing, but we to have well organized and documented what we do have to work with, it's really important,
Yeah. That as well, but that there's been several councils, because
Yes, that's
initially
right.
it was a tradition. So we have
That's
to
right.
rely. But the
Yes.
Mahabodhi Society in Bangalore and the Pali Society also in Sri Lanka has. There's the Pali Canon and the Pali Society.
Yes.
They are Sri Lanka is actually a good repository
Oh, yeah.
of the original original text, or whatever, original quotes or original teachings of the Buddha.
Manuscripts too. I'm not talking about the physical manuscripts like the palm leaf manuscripts and the Gandhar fragments and all these things. I even went to the British Library and talked to one of the librarians about a little bit of this. But yeah, and there's huge digitalization efforts underway too. So I think these are all really cool things. And there's so many texts. Yeah.
Apparently, they also uncovered, thanks to AI and thanks to GPS and
GPT.
No, GIS, GIS and GPS. So the geolocation and the localization, but of how the Earth and the movements.
GPS,
going on.
Global Positioning Satellite. Yes.
Yeah, and GIS, and the one that actually GPS is more like the map, but it doesn't give you the actual location, the actual layers of the territory. So apparently they found some old Buddhist societies under some ghats in India. So things that were covered over the years. So they found all sorts of. Yeah, I will show you.
Yeah, there's a book, In Search of the Buddha. So it was they literally unearthed so many things, like some of the Asoka pillars even,
Yes,
and so many things that were literally buried in India. It was some old white guys, European white guys, that unearthed a lot of this stuff in India in in the 1800s. So yeah, quite incredible.
Yes, and they also now, the state of Odisha, which is a southern eastern state. It's in between West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, somewhere in that area. It's between Chennai and Calcutta, somewhere over there. The state of Odisha actually has unearthed a number of places. There's the Ratnagiri, Altagiri, and there's a number of places there. So there are now festivals starting, chanting Tipitaka and Guru Parama Sambhava festivals being organized over there. I can also send you the link.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot happening, but okay, how does that help with inner peace?
Well, that's right. So that's a good thing. We talked a little bit about things that inspire. We have these, some people get overly involved in physical things or physical locations, but I think if they can inspire faith and then draw people to the practice, then it can be very helpful. And it's interesting to hold this too, when it's even prophesized that this sasana, this Buddha's dispensation, will eventually come to an end. It won't last forever with impermanence. So holding this, another paradox of, okay, how do we best preserve and represent what teachings we have? And then at the same time, knowing they will eventually come to an end, and die out, and holding these two and being okay with that, and doing what we can to skillfully act with these paradoxical things here. Yeah.
Yes. So on Monday, I'm traveling and I'm starting a 3 month journey again, being on the road. But I'm starting with a month in Bodh Gaya. And I was recently hearing, so I've met Luangpo Pasano in December, who he passed so from the Thai for one elder of the Thai forest tradition here in Bangkok, passing by. He had just come back from Bodh Gaya. Then I met last week the Abbot Ajanyaniko, who is the abbot of Abhayagiri Monastery in the Redwood Valley. And he had spent a month on the pilgrimage on the holy places in Sarnath. So we were also talking about Bodh Gaya. Now I'm going again. And somehow this is to say that we came to the same conclusion, or at least the same observation, going there repeatedly for different actual purposes, but same purpose somehow. It is that regardless of the tradition you practice, regardless of your entry point into the Dharma, you are in the Dharma. So your practice might differ from mine. Your sitting posture might differ from your neighbor. But somehow that place of Bodh Gaya is a center where, and it was really interesting to hear an elder of the Thai forest tradition, which is, one of the ascetic branches of Theravada Buddhism in Thailand, speak and observe Tibetan devotees chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, some having the women with the prayer wheel and others with the mala, and saying, and eventually, how is my practice better than that? And how is their practice different from mine? But it has the same, so the container might be different, but the content might be different, but the actual container and expression remain different, but the same. It's just a different, so Bodh Gaya has become really a conversion of these. It's not that it has become, but over the centuries, over the millennium, where the Buddha originally sat down on that Bodhi tree, it has become a gathering of people of all walks. You can see everything there, everything. And that's where I think it's resourcing. For me, it's always, and for everyone who goes to Bodh Gaya, it's always, it's complicated. Bodh Gaya is complicated because it's the poorest state. And you're talking about compassion, it's the poorest state of India. So you say, well, if there wasn't any Bodh Gaya, how can you develop compassion? But it's really it's a complicated place, but somehow everything dissolves when you're there because this is a magnetic power to go. So what I wanted to say is that it doesn't really matter the practice that you have. What matters is that you have a chance to hear the Dharma. You have a chance to hear the Dharma. That's already an enormous merit, because it's not just because it's rare, but because it's a chance for you to plant the seed that can basically help you. So if somebody asks you, Josh, I'm asking you, what is salvation for you? What does salvation mean? How do you relate to salvation?
Probably saving myself from myself. And I also have taints of, okay, that's a Christian baggage that I have with salvation. I'd have to contemplate that a little bit more than getting on the spot. But I would say end of suffering, that it's possible, exactly. And that the path is there and nobody's going to do it for me. I have help and friends along the way. Yes.
Exactly.
But nobody's
Nobody
doing it
can
for
do
me.
it for
Yeah.
And that's where the inner peace comes in. I cannot force you to have, or at least it's not something that you can force someone to have in there. You can only say, listen, I'm encouraging you to find that inner peace, and you're having a super active mind, but you can find inner peace because somehow you have the true, your true nature is a beautiful nature. And this is not just Buddhism who said that. There were a French philosopher 300 years ago that was saying the same thing. French or other, or Greek philosophers as well. They say
Stoics.
Your nature, your nature is basically pure, and everything else that you build on is just about defilements. So in that defilements, you clear the bush. You keep what is important for you to function in a way that is socially acceptable and wholesome, and then develop that inner peace, and that inner peace will help you out no matter what, because once you discover how it works, you want more of it.
And it leads to wisdom, and wisdom, yes,
Yes,
wisdom can
and
overcome everything.
there was someone asked us. I'm in a number of groups, and I often see people saying, "Okay, but in the Theravada tradition or the Thai forest tradition in particular, it's all about restrictions and restrain and restrain." Okay, that's their practice, right? But then you hear the elder, in this case, in my case, it was Rampo Viradamo from Tisarana Monastery when I was in Ontario. He was saying, yes, it's true. It can be perceived like there's a lot, and it's true eventually that you don't eat after the sun. I mean, there's the highest point of the sun, and you have to wake up early somehow. Somehow there has to be some discipline of communal life. Yes, you can see it as so much restraining, but think about the other side too. That's where the non-duality comes in. Think about the non-conventional thing. Instead of seeing it as restriction, see all the freedom and the liberation you have from everything. By not having certain things, your life is simplified.
It's freedom from. That's
It's
usually like in
freedom from.
America, we think about a freedom
Exactly.
to do this, freedom to do that, but a freedom
No.
from. It's a freedom
From.
from crappiness,
Exactly.
stuff, freedom from stress, freedom from all these negative things. Yeah.
Exactly. And I personally, just to make a point towards me, because to come back to the introduction you gave about me, because it's something I've been pondering a lot. People ask me, how can you're not living in a monastery anymore. So you're officially not an upasika anymore. You're not a long-term resident in a Thai forest tradition. Why do you keep your hair shaved? Well, because for me, it's a challenging restrictions. It's one for me, for instance, it's been one of the greatest obstacle as a woman, I guess. I had very long hair, so there's a lot. So, and recently there is a friend of mine who has shaved her head and took a temporary samanera ordination and did the pilgrimage on the Mahapajapati. Was a pilgrimage of Buddhist or Bhikkhunis from Bodh Gaya to the birthplace of the Buddha, and we had this conversation about shaving head. How for women it's completely different. It's something a man can't talk about. Even if you had short hair, it's complicated. So why do I have that? But it's not just so much that, is that why don't you just have more? And I realize I still live as though I'm actually a nun. I'm actually still in a monastery. And it's not a life of restriction that I give myself. I realize I go, and yesterday I accompanied someone doing some shopping, and I said, the freedom of not needing anything. It's not that before it was bad. Before I was in a different realm and I had a child, and so I had to buy certain things. You have to afford. Now it's like I see certain things. Do I actually need? No. So I still operate with my bowl, and I still operate, although I have a full kitchen just for myself. Why do I choose this? Because it's freedom from.
Yes. Yeah. It's really important. And I want to change my not freedom from negativity, because we're still going to experience that. But yeah, it's a reorientation to not what can I do, but what can I be free from. And I implore people to, you can hear a little bit about these things, but you have to take it on for practice for yourself and see how it lands in your heart. Because maybe it's not for everybody, but maybe once you give it a real honest shot, then you can kind of feel some of the peace and freedom that comes from these practices as well. So it's all about what we can let go of, what we can orient, what can we be content with. So if we can be content with very little, then if you view people that have to have everything a certain way, right, and they can't tolerate this and they can't tolerate that, well, I've got news for everybody. There's going to be a lot of times in our lives where we don't have choices. We won't be able to have the option to do what we want to do, right? So then how are we? How are we when things don't go our way? That's a very important spiritual question.
Exactly.
So once I've trained to be content with very little, then none of that's a big deal, where it can be a huge deal for a lot of people. But then it's, I've already trained and practiced this. I can be happy and content with very little. And so it's just a beautiful strategy and training in just so many situations in life, And it's kind of fundamental and foundational too,
It's very much so. And I was going to say, before you earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned how to navigate dual, non-dual world, and so how some people find it really challenging to navigate that. And so when I'm practicing, then I go outside, it's completely different. But while you have those foundations, those ethical foundation, not just understanding, okay, it doesn't mean that I'm not buying a new cushion if I really need, because the cushion has not yet fully disintegrated. That doesn't what it means. Or that but more is not better. And that the basic requirements are really always taken care. If your basic requirements are always taken care of, basically you have a very good platform to go outside and start seeing how, just look at other human being. Just look at them, just not walking with this phone like this constantly in the head. And that is one of the closing remark I want to make regarding Luangpo Pasano, so the elder from the Thai forest tradition. He often speaks of one of the aspects of mindfulness is about maintaining spatial awareness, being constantly aware of spatial awareness. So spatial awareness, being aware of your surroundings. It's something that we use in yoga since I've been teaching yoga for 15 years. So spatial awareness doesn't mean copying the other person or necessarily having to talk to everyone, but having spatial awareness, who is around, how to move in the crowd, how to move on the road. And that's mindfulness. It can save you from an accident because you're going to see the car coming in. That's also something very important. But also it's teaching you to actually maintain that kind of steadiness. You can see a danger coming in, but you can also see, the beauty of the sky. Because if you kind of walk like this, like people do a lot these days, I'm really sorry, but the more you do that, the more complicated it's going to be for you to understand non-duality.
It's beautiful. And it's also called situational awareness too, right?
Situational awareness.
Even just this practice with the space, because this cup that you've seen me drink from, if you're watching this, what's around this cup? We're focused on objects too, but what about the space that's around it too? And another really interesting practice is peripheral vision. So just if we just with our physical eyes just expand so where we can look at the periphery now, how it just kind of brings one into the present moment as well. And it kind of expands the mind state really temporarily. Yeah, it's a really important practice because we're so focused on objects. And I would just say with the phone, and this is not an excuse, but because I've heard there's these apps now that will turn your experience transparent. It will have the camera on, and whatever you're doing on your screen, you can see what's down below as you're walking. So it's ridiculous what we've come to now, that we'll have to have an app to do that, so we can continue looking at our phone and still see the ground below us. So yeah, it is really something, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. I mean, the pros and cons of this, but this is really important to get a handle on this now, because I find I have challenges with it,
Yeah, I think it's a generational thing as well. You can listen to any talks about AI and, social, even you can go from political to health to Buddhism to tech to finances. They're all going to say the same thing. This is going, that there are certain things that I cannot do for the bank on the website. I have to do them here. I cannot do it simply because there's no facial recognition on the computer. So it's not something that is something that we have to deal with. But generationally, we come from a time where we are accustomed to do without, and therefore, for us, we are using it as a tool, as a simple tool for connecting. But for some in the new generation, this is the non-duality. As you say, the app can make you, so you can look at the screen and to actually look at the screen, and at the same time you can see what's happening. So that's going to be the duality. And we cannot get away. It's going to be like this. But how do you manage? I think you just keep going. Keep going the way, because it's their issue eventually. We can make is we are
Yeah.
going to come to, I was listening to several actually podcasts in the past few days where considering the samsara is not going to get any better. Having mindfulness, anxiety prevention, and resilience building, but not the same kind of resilience as something that you have to add on. It's really something that you have to build. Because there are people who are extremely empathic for the damages to the environment, and they cannot get away with the fact that the environment is being damaged. And I said, okay, fine, but empathy is the problem of empathy is that it stops there. It makes you it can drain you. If you step in and understand and having compassion, maybe you can start doing something at your
Absolutely.
own problem. That's one aspect. The second is that there are lots of people who are, oh my gosh, this person has passed away. Oh my God, this is person. Yeah, we're all gonna pass away. So don't get too much attached to this actually physicality and how everything is changing. And it's very difficult because things are going much faster than in our generation or past generations. I mean, the pre 2000, whichever age you are. It's extremely difficult to now to say to stop things. It's just accelerating.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you can only, even more than before, you need to build your own resources. And that
Yes.
inner peace. I'm coming back to this inner peace because
Inner
it's really
peace.
going to be
Yes.
your asset. It's going to be your asset because very few people realize how everything can disappear from your life in just one instant.
Yep. Exactly.
And
Loss, dealing. Yeah.
you cannot grasp because if it has to go, it has to go. And as you know,
Yeah.
I know quite a great deal of that. So, but what does it teach? It teaches you that inner peace is your strength.
Yes, exactly. Because people look at peace sometimes and they think it's weak, but no, actually, and vulnerability can be a strength, because
Vulnerability
it
is a
does
strength. Yeah.
it does allow this, vulnerability allows openness and connection, and
Yes.
inner peace allows stability, groundedness, collectedness, and
Yeah.
a place of where we can come from wise action and wise response instead of reactivity and destruction too. So yeah, and I will challenge people though to do a slight digital detox. I mean, we were talking about Ahsoka's
Mm-hmm.
retreat before here and how she just limited it to bare essentials online. I did a month-long Zen retreat in Korea where I turned in my devices. And let me tell you, that was just that alone was so challenging. And I didn't even realize how much reference point for reality and my sanity actually is tied now to digital devices and digital interactions. But no matter what we want to do or how we want to digital detox, I think we need to do some degree of that. But at the same time, I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
Luddite either, where we throw it all away and just live in some kind of caveman world or something. So it's about balance, and we can never have enough mindfulness, that's for sure. So I welcome people to help me interact with my devices more mindfully. I know it's way easier for me when I'm not constantly interacting with a device to be more mindful, like this, just talking and communicating. Then I can realize I'm talking to a computer screen in front of me and not actually Ahsoka. But when that mindfulness is there, it's just like I'm not even aware. But so yeah, these are important
The
things.
Buddha, the
And
Buddha.
we still have one last thing. We still have a reference point, our generation, for what life was like before the internet. Kids today, they don't have that reference point. They don't know a world without internet.
No. And there are already two generations who don't know about that because there's an earlier one that, yeah,
That's right.
that the
The
one,
millennials.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's just I mean, they just the 90s, the one from the
Yeah.
90s.
That's
But
right.
anyway, what I wanted to remind ourselves that the Buddha spoke always about the middle way in everything. So do not engage in extreme of everything. So it requires, mindfulness is maybe has become the McDonald of Buddhism, as Melvin MacLeod was talking about it. Actually, we invited the Lion's Roar to Bhutan, but he has retired, so someone else came in. And however, well, he spoke about this in a very good way, in the sense that it was symbolizing, expressing the fact that it's mindfulness for eating and mindfulness for walking and mindfulness for educating the kids and mindfulness for my yoga and mindfulness for my cosmetic routine or whatever it is. That's not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is the basis of everything. But having said that, he reminded also the middle way. So the middle way is always being able to catch back where it is, because we are human, right? So we tend to go to extreme. I can't say yesterday I didn't buy anything because I was really free from any desire of having or purchasing or whatever. But I can't say that I didn't say, oh, this is nice. It was nice. What I had in my hand is really nice. But then I look at it and I say, wait, it's nice. And I put it back, So you come back to the middle way. Do I actually need this? Is it useful? And that's a mindful effort, because also the Buddha taught that if Dharma is easy to you, then it's not real Dharma. So you need to put a little bit of effort, a little bit of training here. Come on, just not let go too much of it. And as you said, also, I think being honest about the fact that there's going to be, my tendency is to sleep late. Okay, if my tendency to sleep late in the morning, okay, then I shift something and I'm mindfulness, my meditation in the evening, or I do it later in the morning. It's okay. It doesn't mean that every one of us has to become a monk or a monastery and go into restraint. It just means, what is the middle way that works for you?
And the relationship
what
too.
Is your, and yes, and how can you navigate yourself your own little middle way? And that already is going to be an enormous training for your mind. And then
absolutely.
Something else I have come back to is the Buddha. In my case, it's been the Buddha. So it's been really checking the breath either with the Buddha, which works, but also stopping the breath here, the focus of the breath here, which is something that is being done in Dzogchen as well. But you stop, so you're not concentrating too much on breathing in and breathing out, and it's going. It just stops here, and then after that last breath, there is a moment where nothing happens. And that's where you start really realizing what it means to rest in awareness, rest in the natural awareness. Wow. And you can stay there. And if you start doing a little bit pieces by pieces, eventually one day you might end up staying 1 hour. And that's where something is one day is going to switch. So that's what I recommend to people to really, and that's really the seed of inner peace. That is something nobody can take away from you. Whether you are in a hospital, where you are attending to rush in the airport, whether you need to wait in the hot sun to cross the road, whatever, it stays with you. We had a big earthquake here, so that's already almost a year ago. But that moment, you realize how it's very easy to be shaken. Yeah, so that inner peace, seeds by seeds, it goes and grows, and then you find your middle way.
Well, that's beautiful, Asoka. I think we'll leave it there, and may everybody's mindfulness practice become optimal for their own well-being and for everyone else's. And may we all come to know optimal peace and how we relate in skillful ways to ourselves and to everyone around us and everything around us for our own well-being and that of everyone else's. So may all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free. Thank you all listening.
Thank you.
Bye.